He liked life, and he liked making movies. And
America, 1907. It was the time of a rough-riding president, of a vanquished people, and of an immigrant's dream. It was a time of scientific discovery, of first flights, and of tamed frontiers. In the heart of the Midwest, on a land once teeming with buffalo, America found its destiny. It was here in Winterset, Iowa, that John Wayne was born as Marion Robert Morrison on May 26, 1907. His father, Clyde, was a well-liked pharmacist who was known for his generosity and good nature. His mother, Molly, was a domineering woman who was unhappy with her husband's lack of ambition.
His father continually lost jobs, moved around in Iowa. His mother was somebody who wanted success and resented the fact that the father was unsuccessful. And so they were quarreling all the time.
In 1912, the family grew to include a second son, Robert. But Clyde's poor health caused mounting financial pressures that overshadowed the joys of a growing family. Heart trouble and chronic asthma forced Clyde to close his pharmacy and declare bankruptcy. The resulting tension in the household was not lost on little Marion. He began to suffer from insomnia and ran away from home more than once, as his parents' arguments became more heated. In 1914, the Morrison family moved to Palmdale, California, where the ever-optimistic Clyde hoped his health and his luck would improve. He swapped his pharmacy work for homesteading on an 80-acre plot of land owned by his father. But most of California's fertile farmland was already taken, and what he found was an arid patch of desert that would be difficult to farm.
It was a very primitive, we're talking the late frontier. They're really trying to play frontiersmen when the frontier has gone, and eking out a living there was impossible.
Wayne hated the place. It didn't have electricity. He was scared of the big jackrabbits and the snakes, and hated the horse that he had to ride.
After 2 years of this desolate existence, in 1916, the troubled Morrison family packed up and moved to Glendale, California, a small community on the outskirts of Hollywood. But relocation did little to solve the family's financial problems. As his parents struggled to make ends meet, Marion learned to be self-reliant and took a morning paper route to pay for his school clothes and help with some of the household expenses. Though the family remained in Glendale, mortgage foreclosures and eviction notices forced the Morrisons to move 8 times in only 5 years. The constant moving made it hard for young Marion to make friends. Insecure and something of a loner, he was especially self-conscious when it came to his name.
It was a sissy name, and he took a lot of guff from his peers as a child over that name. So he spent a lot of time alone.
Marion's best friend was his huge Airedale dog, an oversized companion who would offer a solution to his most troubling predicament.
The dog's name was Duke, and they used to stop by a fire station, and the firemen began referring to Big Duke and Little Duke, so that name stuck. I think he was delighted to escape the Marion label.
11-year-old Duke relished the attention and camaraderie of the firemen who had given him his new name. Brave and sturdy men who faced trouble head-on and risked their lives for the safety of others. It was these same traits that Duke found compelling in the silent movie heroes he watched at the Glendale Theater. Saturday afternoons would be spent riding beside his cowboy idols, men like the roughshod Harry Carey, a lone spirit who fought for the common good and prevailed against all odds. Living only miles from the heart of the film industry, the star-struck boy could also watch his heroes' exploits in real life. When Hollywood studios brought their casts and crews out to film in Glendale's Verdugo foothills. Sometimes the film crew would even let Duke do small jobs around the set. and afterwards joined the men for a box lunch. In 1921, 14-year-old Duke entered Glendale Union High School. By now, the wiry boy had shot up to nearly 6 feet and was maturing into a handsome and athletic young man.
In school, he blossomed. He was developing into a good-looking boy, so the girls liked him. He was an athlete, so the boys liked him. This sort of loner quality disappeared, and he won acceptance and developed some self-confidence.
You look at Duke Wayne's high school yearbook. He's president of the Shakespeare Club. He's co-captain of the football team. He's the leader in everything. He's in the drama club. He's in this, and he's in the French club, and he's in that. I mean, the guy was an all-American high school all-star, you know, the all-American kid.
After graduation, Duke was more determined than ever to make something of himself. With his family still in financial trouble, it was his physical assets, rather than his good grades, that offered him the opportunity of a college education. In 1925, the burly athlete was awarded a football scholarship at the University of Southern California and began courses in pre-law. Joining the Sigma Chi fraternity, he agreed to bus tables and wash dishes in exchange for room and board.
He was very, very popular. I mean, here's a guy with no money, right, no social connections. He joined Sigma Chi like that. I mean, that's a very high-end fraternity house at USC.
The 6'4" athlete became well known on campus and enjoyed the wild parties and special attention granted to football players and fraternity men. His good looks and good manners also made him popular with the ladies. During spring break of his freshman year, he met Josephine Sands, a young Spanish-American beauty who came from a world very different from his own.
Josephine came from a family that was very well placed in the Hispanic community in Los Angeles. Her father was a diplomat, and then they came from a pretty high social status.
The couple began to date regularly, and the two soon fell in love. But sophomore year brought tough times when a shoulder injury sidelined 20-year-old Duke for the football season. Unable to play, he was cut from the team, and his scholarship was revoked. With the prospect of a free education now gone, Duke took a job at the William Fox Studios for $35 a week.
His football coach got him a job at the old Fox lot on Western Avenue, and he was working as a prop boy. You know, he's a big guy and could carry sofas and whatever needed being carried.
Always a team player, Duke enjoyed the camaraderie of being part of a film crew and developed a reputation as a hard worker. He even attracted the attention of John Ford, one of Fox's star directors. Usually gruff and irritable to newcomers, Ford was disarmed by Duke's confident and easygoing manner, and the two struck up a friendship.
Well, I think the connection was football, because my granddad had played high school football. And also, the guy's the most attractive, likable guy who ever lived. He's absolutely charismatic, even at that young age.
The athletic prop boy was soon rewarded with occasional jobs as a stuntman, and his good looks brought him work as an extra and bit player. In 1929, his friend John Ford even gave him a speaking part as a midshipman alongside another USC football player, Ward Bond, in the Naval Academy drama Salute.
You ever been to the movies, mister?
Sure.
What do they do in the movies, mister?
Why, they next her.
He doesn't mean the audience. What do the actors do, mister?
We'll see what it is.
Duke also caught the attention of Fox director Raoul Walsh. Walsh thought that the wholesome young man might be perfect for the lead role in his upcoming widescreen western, The Big Trail.
With Wayne, he saw this lean, very graceful, tall man, and he wanted to pit him against rougher types as a kind of symbol of good in this movie.
Though studio executives were hesitant to cast an inexperienced actor in Fox's biggest production of the year, Walsh was persuasive, and Duke was offered the starring role in The Big Trail for the modest salary of $75 a week. With his movie contract came a new All-American name, chosen for him by Winfield Sheehan, Fox's head of production. At 22, Duke Morrison became John Wayne.
We're taking on a new scout.
Guess again, Flack. I started with this outfit, and I'll be with it at the finish.
Who says so?
I'm just telling you. I got two reasons. One is I told Wilmore I'd scout the train through. And the other is a little personal business I aim to transact at the end of the trail. See if you can figure out what that is, Flack.
Playing Breck Coleman, an idealistic young trailblazer leading a wagon train west, Wayne's physical grace and gentle good looks made up for his inexperience.
Miss Ruth, you shouldn't be riding out here alone like this, away from the train.
Why not?
Because this is dangerous country, and anything might happen.
You wouldn't care.
Care? Me?
Why should you care?
Listen, girl. If anything happened to you, it'd be like throwing my heart to the wall.
There was a kind of sweetness, the kind of prairie innocence of him, and the kind of idealism. This was one gorgeous kid.
Marion Morrison was familiar with reinventing himself. The shy, skinny boy who became the strapping and popular Duke knew that his determination and charisma could take him places. But little did the 22-year-old know how far he would go, and just how difficult the journey would be. Filmed in a new 70mm format called Grandeur Pictures, The Big Trail was hailed as Fox's most ambitious picture of the year. But just as the movie completed production, America's economy was plunged into a deep depression.
The tremendous crowds which you see gathered outside the stock exchange are due to the greatest crash in the history of the New York Stock Exchange in market prices.
On October 29th, 1929, the stock market crashed. Banks closed and millions lost their jobs and their life savings. When The Big Trail was released in 1930, only a handful of theaters could afford to play the widescreen film. The picture failed miserably at the box office and drew little public attention to its greenhorn star. Wayne's next two films didn't fare much better, and the 23-year-old former college football star was dropped from the Fox studio roster. Though off to a shaky start, Duke liked acting and was determined to make a living at it. But when his next job at Columbia Pictures lasted less than a year, John Wayne found his only form of employment in the cheap westerns produced by Hollywood's B-movie studios.
They are 55-minute odors, very much turned out on a formula. He even plays the same character in several of them and rides the same horse, and you know, they plugged in a new leading lady occasionally.
Drop that gun. I keep him covered. Men, we didn't kill Mason. If you'll call his daughter, she'll prove it. Here she comes now.
Miss Mason, these men have accused us of killing your father.
Oh, no, Mr. Melgrove. These are the men that drove the outlaws away and saved my life.
Well, in that case, we certainly owe you gentlemen an apology.
While the roles on Hollywood's Poverty Row weren't demanding, the work was steady, and it kept Wayne out of the unemployment lines.
I think he was a workaholic. He turned on this work, and it became so much a part of him that there was no turning it off.
Over the next few years, Wayne cut his teeth on these popular serial westerns. Appearing in close to 30 films, he modeled his characters after his childhood hero, Harry Carey.
The Harry Carey character as a cowboy impressed John Wayne. His power came from understatement. He didn't have to strut, he didn't have to shout. Wayne became the inheritor of the Harry Carey natural cowboy approach.
With each picture, Wayne honed his acting skills, capitalizing on his physical assets.
He learned to walk with a great rhythmic grace. He had a kind of undulant walk. The way he stood, the way he rode in the saddle, it took him a while to develop all of that.
While Wayne was establishing himself as a believable Western hero, he was also building a personal life. In In 1933, Wayne asked his girlfriend of 7 years, Josie Sands, to be his wife. And on June 24th, the couple married at the home of actress Loretta Young, a Sands family friend. The next year, Duke and Josie celebrated the birth of a son, Michael. But the long hours and non-stop production of the Western serials left the actor tired and with little time for his new family.
He would like to have been a good family man. But if you're making one B-Western after the other, that's exhausting work.
Your cyclones are all whirlwinds, fella. You'd better run along before a storm breaks. Because I got a feeling I'm going to cloud up and rain all over you.
You and whose arm?
But even when there was a break from the 12-hour workdays and back-to-back productions, Wayne preferred the company of his buddies from the set. Evenings were spent carousing at the Hollywood Athletic Club with friends like movie cowboy George Gabby Hayes, stuntman Yakima Canutt, and actors Paul Fix and Ward Bond. Weekends often found Wayne aboard director John Ford's yacht, the Arraner. Duke shared Ford's love of drinking, card-playing, and the sea. And the men would often take long cruises, escaping the pressures and attention of Hollywood.
My grandfather enjoyed Wayne's company. He enjoyed Wayne's wit. Wayne is a terrific card player. And they loved to play cribbage, they loved to play bridge. They would go off and get away from the wives, get away from the family, maybe do a little fishing. That's what guys like to do, you know? Guy stuff.
But Wayne's hard-drinking escapades and macho friends were worlds apart from his home life, and his marriage to his devoutly Catholic wife, Josie, soon began to show signs of trouble.
Duke is a B-Western actor, and that didn't quite fit her concept of society. And Duke would come home and there would be a priest in the house, and she was surrounded by a very strong Catholic entourage.
By 1938, after churning out nearly 70 pictures in just 9 years, the actor had reached a critical plateau in his career.
He's typecast as a Western actor. Everybody in Hollywood knows who he is. You know, John Wayne, ex-jock, moves well, so-so actor, rides good, looks good on a horse.
He was fighting for a long time, the cowboy encapturement, you know, that he didn't want to be caught always in the same role, and he was trying to move out of it.
On a weekend trip in 1938, director John Ford asked Duke to read the script of his latest project, Stagecoach. By now, Ford was a powerful Academy Award-winning director, and it had been a decade since he and Duke had worked together. Though Stagecoach was a modestly budgeted Western, Wayne never expected his friend to offer him the role of the Ringo Kid. It was the opportunity of a lifetime.
What fascinating stories there were in the life of the Stagecoach, and in the lives of its courageous passengers who found romance in danger and understanding in strange companionships. From the adventures of these American frontier characters, John Ford has created a truly great motion picture.
Hold it!
Whoa, steady, ho. Hey, look, it's Ringo.
Yeah. Going to Lordsburg? I figured you'd be there by this time.
No. Lame horse. Well, it looks like you've got another passenger.
Yeah. I'll take the Winchester.
You may need me in this Winchester, Curly.
You don't understand, kid. You're under arrest.
Ford had earned a reputation as a cruel taskmaster and was known for his harsh treatment of actors and unorthodox directing style. Even though Wayne brought 10 years of experience to his role, he was made to feel like an amateur.
Ford just browbeat Wayne. In Monument Valley, when they were making that, Claire Trevor said he would grab hold of Wayne's chin and shake it and say, "Don't you know you don't act with your head, your movements, you act with your eyes in films." But he brought a performance out of Wayne that was classic.
Well, you're the notorious Ringo Kid.
My friends just call me Ringo. Nickname I had as a kid. Right name's Henry.
Didn't I fix your arm once when you bumped off a horse?
That was my kid brother broke his arm. You did a good job, Doc, even if you was drunk.
What happened to that boy whose arm I fixed?
He was murdered.
If you look at the script, the Ringo Kid isn't all that much. But if you look at the movie, the Ringo Kid is terrific. What Wayne manages to do through his sheer graceful movements and his Nureyev quality and his presence on camera is transcend that part and make it into more than it really was.
Released in 1939, Stagecoach was a critical and box office smash. Nominated for 7 Academy Awards, it was hailed as one of the top films of the year. Critics singled out Wayne's sensitive performance, and after 10 years in Hollywood, he was welcomed into the ranks of A-movie actors. Duke Morrison had worked long and hard to make something of John Wayne, and he was willing to protect his investment at any cost. The tremendous success of Stagecoach introduced John Wayne to an entirely new audience and gave him the breakthrough he had hoped for. Over the next 2 years, major studios cast him in a variety of featured roles, opposite famous leading ladies like Marlene Dietrich, and under the direction of distinguished filmmakers like Cecil B. DeMille. But as the B-movie veteran was stepping into his A-movie career, events far away from the comfort of Hollywood's sound stages were about to change the playing field dramatically. On December 7th, 1941, bombs fell on Pearl Harbor, and America declared war on Japan. Within hours of the news, young men and women, driven by a new sense of patriotism, signed up for the fight for freedom. But for John Wayne, the decision to enlist was not an easy one. By now, the actor's family had grown to include 3 more children: Mary Antonia, Patrick, and Melinda. Though work had been steady, Wayne was still earning a modest income by Hollywood standards. With little savings in the bank, the 34-year-old felt a greater responsibility to his family than to his country.
Wayne had 4 children. He was getting to the upper limit of draft age. And then from a personal standpoint, he had worked for over 10 years in the salt mines of Hollywood, doing B movies. And finally, he's arrived at his moment.
Republic Pictures, who had Wayne under contract, was unwilling to lose their top moneymaker. The studio and Wayne knew that if he joined up, his most marketable years would be spent on the front line. As many of Hollywood's top stars signed up for the duration, Wayne filed for exemption from duty based on his age and family obligations. Major studios in desperate need of leading men were eager to take advantage of the actor's availability, casting him in a series of westerns and wartime adventure films.
Your first duty is to do as you are told.
Take it easy, Bob.
What did you call me?
Bob.
She is an American student. They speak strangely.
American.
In 1942, Wayne's portrayal of a quietly heroic squadron leader opposite Anna Lee in The Flying Tigers struck a chord with wartime audiences and became one of the biggest hits of the year.
The great American spirit takes to the air to free the skies of cowardly monsters that release instruments of death and destruction upon a gallant people.
Why don't you go home?
You need a nurse. Suppose you cut yourself shaving.
He just had some kind of charisma about him, and he was a typical American. And I think that's something that people wanted to see.
And this was a time when action films were very popular. Escapist, dealing with the war, often with a strong strain of propaganda for the war, and action was Wayne's forte. So he really emerges during that period.
John Wayne's believable portrayals of the single-minded American soldier who valiantly fights for justice and liberty captured moviegoers as no other performer had. John Wayne was becoming the idealized American hero. But Wayne's new celebrity and busy schedule only widened the growing rift between him and his wife, Josie. The couple now seemed to have little in common but their children.
He was always there, certainly financially, but from something of a distance, in part because he's working, and in part because he's not home.
Fan magazines continued to portray Wayne as the ideal husband and father. But by 1942, Duke had moved out of the house and into an apartment. Though Josie agreed to a separation, her strong Catholic beliefs prevented her from granting a divorce.
I think he wanted to be a good family man. He loved his children. He wanted to be a good father. He felt she was a very good woman, and couldn't quite reconcile that the marriage wasn't working.
With many of Hollywood's most eligible bachelors away at the front, Wayne had become a prime target for his co-stars' affections. Marlene Dietrich singled him out, making 3 pictures with the handsome leading man and initiating a long and passionate affair. Wayne was also linked romantically with a beautiful and engaging Mexican woman, Esperanza Chata Bauer, whom he had met during a business trip to Mexico. In 1943, Republic Pictures brought Chata to Los Angeles and put her under contract. By now, Wayne had fallen madly in love and did little to keep the affair a secret.
Duke had grown up in a somewhat puritanical home life, and Duke had some puritanical attitudes regarding sex. Esperanza was uninhibited, and he hadn't experienced this before.
Once a loner in Hollywood who enjoyed the company of only a few close friends, Wayne was now more visible on the nightclub circuit. He and Chata would spend evenings out drinking and mingling with Tinseltown's elite. The very public affair proved to be the final blow to Duke and Josie's marriage. In October of 1943, Josie began proceedings to end their 10-year union. In 1945, as America entered its 4th and final year in World War II, Wayne signed on for 2 guts and glory combat pictures. They were Expendable and Back to Bataan.
I know it's tough when the woman you love goes over to the enemy, but you can't let her
Look,
tear
John,
your
it's
heart.
none of your business.
That's right. But risking the lives of these men is my business.
By now, Wayne's macho stoicism and confident demeanor had solidly cemented his characters into the psyche of wartime audiences. Though Wayne had never served, to his growing number of fans, the soldiers he played were believable and inspirational.
He was able to merge his own personality, which comes through very clearly in film, but he had a natural quality that projected on film, carried across into the dark of the audience with simplicity and with conviction and truth.
On August 15, 1945, the United States celebrated its victory over Japan, and World War II was over. Now firmly established as a bankable leading man, Wayne had won his own battle for acceptance in the industry big leagues. But as Hollywood's biggest stars returned home, 38-year-old John Wayne wondered if he could stay on top. On January 17, 1946, against the strong objections of his closest friends, John Wayne married Esperanza Chata Bauer. Though the couple had been dating for 3 years, Duke's friends feared that Chata's wild ways and questionable background made her a less than ideal wife. Duke, however, was deeply in love with the volatile actress and ready for marriage. But almost immediately, his thriving career would become a source of bitter conflict for the newlyweds. In 1946, Wayne made his producing debut for Republic Pictures with the modest western Angel and the Bad Man, a pacifist tale of a gunfighter reformed by a Quaker girl.
Well, supposing somebody whacks you over the head with a branding iron, won't that hurt?
Physically, of course. But in reality, it would injure only the person doing the act of force or violence. Only the doer can be hurt by a mean or evil act.
Are there very many of you Quakers?
Very few.
Sort of figured that.
Co-starring beside Wayne was Gail Russell, a beautiful but tormented young woman that the star took under his wing.
Gail Russell was a troubled young actress, had a drinking problem, emotionally very insecure. I think Duke felt sorry for her.
Wayne's new bride, however, had little understanding for the friendship. Insanely jealous and certain that her husband was having an affair, Shanta began drinking heavily and was prone to violent public outbursts. Wayne's life at home became a living hell.
It was a terribly tempestuous relationship, and she didn't really fit his world. So that was a bad marriage, I guess the phrase is, from the get-go.
When Angel and the Bad Man opened to lukewarm reviews and weak box office returns, Wayne welcomed the chance to return solely to acting under the experienced direction of Howard Hawks in Red River.
Starring John Wayne and Montgomery Clift in a story taken from the annals of the great state of Texas. The story of the man who blazed the way for a new frontier. The story of the first drive on the dangerous Chisholm Trail.
We got 1,000 miles to go. There's going to be Indian territory. It's going to be a fight all the way. There'll be no quitting along the way, not by me and not by you.
Only 39, Wayne was offered the challenging role of Tom Dunson, a stubborn, ruthless, yet sympathetic rancher much older than any character Duke had played before, and much more complex. Critics hailed Wayne's portrayal as authentic and gripping, and even John Ford expressed surprise at the depth of Wayne's performance.
You should have let him kill me, because I'm going to kill you. Every time you turn around, expect to see me. There's one time you'll turn around and I'll be there. I'm going to kill you, Matt.
He often said that Stagecoach established him as a star and Red River established him as an actor. And this was a challenge for him. So it was a significant film in his career.
The character he played, the character he invented, was matchless. And again, the American persona of the man who's hard, but believes in doing right and will do it against all odds. Red River ranks as maybe the best Western ever made.
The authoritative figure Wayne played in Red River ushered in a new, more mature type of character. John Ford quickly cast him as a military leader in 2 cavalry films, Fort Apache and She Wore a Yellow Ribbon.
I think it's something, frankly, that they stumbled onto, and these created the formula that people will always remember as maybe the zenith of the American Western.
Colonel, if you send out the regiment, Cochise will think I've tricked him.
Exactly. We have tricked him into returning to American soil, and I intend to see that he stays here.
Colonel Thursday, I gave my word to Cochise. No man is going to make a liar out of me, sir.
His sensitive and three-dimensional performances in Red River and Ford's cavalry pictures firmly established Wayne as a serious actor and a big box office draw. Now able to lobby for prime roles, Wayne fought for and won the lead in the World War II drama The Sands of Iwo Jima. Duke immediately identified with the heroic Sergeant Stryker, a professional soldier who hid a soft heart behind a tough exterior.
Well, you can sit here and be tough if you want to, but I'm going out there and get that guy. And the only way you can stop me is to kill me.
That's just what I'll do.
With the U.S. at the height of its post-war power, Wayne Sergeant Stryker personified the ideal U.S. serviceman. A man with a confident willingness to take action and a fierce sense of duty. Wayne's outstanding portrayal of the patriotic Marine earned him an Oscar nomination in 1949 for Best Actor and sealed his image as the quintessential war hero. Though the Oscar went to Broderick Crawford for All the King's Men, Wayne's popularity was greater than ever. That year, he entered the top 10 of Box Office Magazine's most popular actors, rising to number 4 on the list.
He's the common man. He came up the tough way, did not have the mammoth publicity office behind that he would have had if he had been under contract to MGM, that Gable had, that Tyrone Power had. And he conquered the frontier on film, and he won World War II on film, and did these things that we like to think are very typical American traits. He was a man of action.
At the end of 1950, after 20 years in the movies, the Motion Picture Herald named John Wayne Hollywood's most popular star. The 43-year-old actor was beginning to live in the shadow of his screen image, an image that would take him places he could never have imagined. By 1950, with World War II long over, many Americans saw a new enemy in communism.
Our education is proceeding apace as to how Russia operates and how they got the atom bomb.
While the country was building bomb shelters and learning to duck and cover, Senator Joseph McCarthy and the House Un-American Activities Committee were conducting an all-out search for Communist Party members.
This is the beginning of the Korean War, the loss of China to the communists. People are very terrified, and they're turning within, and they're looking for super patriotic themes, and they're also looking for villains everywhere, and we have these communist witch hunts.
Hollywood was on the front lines of the domestic Cold War. The Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals had joined the anti-communist fight in 1944. And in 1949, John Wayne moved from its executive board to serve as president. Duke's heroic image and strong pro-American views made him the natural choice to represent the organization.
For the past 10 years, the disciples of dictatorship have had the most to say and have said it louder and more often. All over the world, they pour their mouthings into the ears of the people, wearing them down their resistance by repeated hammerings of half-truths. Well, that's where our crusade for freedom comes in.
They had a role of trying to cooperate with the committees by pointing them in certain directions. They had accumulated their own lists of suspect people, and everybody was on it. Wayne didn't have anything to do with drawing up those lists. He was just a figurehead, really.
In 1951, Wayne, Ward Bond, and John Ford flew to Ireland to begin production on the old-fashioned romance, The Quiet Man. The Quiet Man was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, winning 3. But Wayne's performance was not among the nominations. Friends speculated that the star's conservative politics were making him unpopular with his peers. But as far as moviegoers were concerned, Wayne was still an American hero. And his next 2 pictures, Flying Leathernecks and Operation Pacific, were box office hits. While still president of the Motion Picture Alliance, Wayne was becoming less active, preferring instead to fight the enemy and communism on the big screen where he felt more comfortable. When Warner Brothers offered Wayne a producing deal, the 44-year-old star chose Big Jim McClain, the story of 2 government investigators sent to Honolulu to smash a communist ring.
In waterfront dives, McLean felt the intruder's hand, but he could never see his face. The trail led him into the mysteries of the Orient, down Honolulu's back streets and blind alleys. But each road suddenly came to a dead end.
I told you not to mind my business. Now make it so they don't have to tell you again.
You're pulling my shirt.
Yeah, well, I may pull your ears off.
He had to be more American than anybody around, in a sense maybe to compensate for not having served in the Second World War.
Moviegoers responded favorably to the film's message, and the picture was an undeniable hit. But popularity polls and strong box office returns could not change the fact that Wayne's personal life was in shambles. Jotta's heavy drinking and increasingly erratic behavior had become an embarrassment to the very private Wayne, and the battles that once fueled their passion now exhausted him. In 1952, the couple separated after 6 stormy years together. Shortly thereafter, the 45-year-old movie star traveled to Peru on a working vacation, and there met a 23-year-old Peruvian actress, Pilar Palette.
I was making a movie in the most beautiful benign jungle in the Amazon, and the director one morning told me, John Wayne is in Lima. He has just arrived, and he would like to come and see us work. Well, I had no idea. I heard the name and that he was a big movie star, very handsome, very tall, but I couldn't quite place him. So trying to be very sophisticated, I turned to him and I said, Mr. Wayne, you were wonderful in For Whom's the Bell Toll. And he says, you have me completely confused. You're thinking of my friend Gary Cooper. So anyway, he started laughing. He thought I was very funny, and that kind of broke the ice.
When Pilar came to Hollywood after filming, she and Wayne began a very secret affair. And in September of 1952, Wayne filed for divorce from Chata.
She turned very bitter and decided to just crucify him. So there were court days every single day, and of course, it was headlines, like for weeks.
The trial became a public spectacle, and wild accusations of infidelity and abuse surfaced in the press. A calculated bid by Chata to win sympathy and a large settlement. While Duke had long since separated from his first wife, he remained a loyal and loving father. He was especially worried about the effect the negative publicity would have on his teenage children.
The breakup with Esperanza is as close to scandal as Duke really ever came. I think Esperanza wanted the divorce to be as public as possible. She liked the attention, and there's a bit of a vengeance motive there. So it became a pretty messy affair, for sure.
Throughout the proceedings, Pilar stood by Duke's side, offering a stability and serenity that had long been missing from his life. In November of 1954, Wayne's divorce was finally granted, and 2 days later, he and Pilar were wed.
He was making a movie in Kona, Hawaii, and Duke said, I just had a phone call from my lawyer, my divorce has become final. Would you like to get married today? He wanted to get married just as the sun was setting. He claimed years later that he was married at breakfast, divorced at lunch, and married at dinner.
At 48, Wayne was still the nation's #1 star. It seemed as though nothing could tarnish his all-American image. And if John Wayne's first 25 years in front of the camera had made him a Hollywood giant, the next 25 would make him a legend. By the mid-1950s, America was changing. It was a time of television and rock and roll, a time of hot rods, hot blondes, and young rebels. It was also a time of heroes, and none walked taller than John Wayne. In 1955, Wayne was offered the...
I'm not sure you could get a major movie star today to play that role, and to play it with the kind of intensity and total darkness and commitment to the kind of hopeless rage that his character portrays in that movie. It's ugly, and yet you can't take your eyes off the performance. He brings his own natural strength of character and his presence to the screen.
Stand aside, Martin.
No, you don't, Ethan. Ethan, no, you don't!
Stand aside.
The 48-year-old father of 4 had always encouraged his family to join him on location, and The Searchers, filmed in Utah's Monument Valley, was no exception. Even 15-year-old son Patrick played a small part in the film, and new wife Pilar was ever present.
I was on location the whole time, and the minute the director said, cut, we would just go and have a ball. They were all there playing music, and everybody was barbecuing, and it was just a real kind of a family. It was just a lot of fun because everybody got along really well.
Released in 1956, The Searchers was a hit with audiences and critics alike. Its success proved that in an age of changing acting styles and audience tastes, John Wayne could still deliver what America craved. Later that same year, Duke and Pilar celebrated the birth of a daughter, Aissa. Wayne was ecstatic to have a second chance at fatherhood.
Well, his first children, unfortunately, when they were little, Duke was just starting a career, so he didn't have as much time to spend with those 4 older kids. He probably felt a little bit guilty, although he loved them. After the baby was born, he became a blithering idiot about this child. The sun rose and set on Aissa.
It now seemed that Wayne was untouchable. He had been a box office star for over 15 years, and was able to command over $500,000 per picture. But the star's next series of films did not achieve the success he had come to expect. Though critics blamed weak scripts and lackluster direction, Wayne was stunned when his movies began failing at the box office. To make matters worse, his busy career was increasingly at odds with the needs of his growing family. While wife Pilar had happily accompanied her husband on location in the past, she now had a toddler in tow, and life on the road was more difficult.
We were like gypsies, because Duke made a lot of movies, and each movie required that we would go like for 4 months to different locations. And I was just dying to get home, and no longer had we gotten home, there was another movie being made. It was very hectic.
But slowing down wasn't an option for Wayne. The 30-year screen veteran feared that diminishing box office returns meant his days as a leading man were numbered. Now 49, Wayne's age was beginning to show. A hairpiece hid his receding hairline, and the former athlete was finding it difficult to keep his weight down.
When he was not on the set, he was kind of ill at ease. He didn't quite know what to do with himself. He was working so much all the time that there was not much time for him to do anything else. He was not interested in sports. He never played golf or tennis, and so he tended to get out of shape when he was not making a movie, and he tended to drink too much. So he almost needed the movie-making process to discipline himself.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the giant gong of Kyoto that you just heard, out of the mystic lore of the Orient. When it rings, things of utmost importance are about to happen, as they do in the story I'm about to tell you. The fabulous story of Townsend Harris, first white man to open up the Orient, and of the beautiful geisha who was sent to love him and kill him.
When Duke flew to Japan to begin production on John Huston's The Barbarian and the Geisha, he was hoping for a hit.
Mr. Harris, we have had no wars for the last 200 years in my country. How many have you had in the West?
Too many. Yet some were fought for liberty.
But almost from the start, Wayne found himself at odds with his director. Battles quickly erupted over Huston's improvisational working style, which Wayne felt was undisciplined and unprofessional.
I think they disagreed about everything. I think if Duke said white, Huston said black, and you know, it was one of those things that they clash. They really clash completely. He managed to finish the picture, but he thought that was one of the worst pictures he was ever connected with.
Critics lambasted Wayne's awkward portrayal of a 19th century diplomat, and audiences stayed away. It was the actor's fourth failure in a row, and to add to his distress, a raging fire had ravaged his Encino home. Though Pilar and Aisa escaped unharmed, the event was traumatic for everyone concerned. Now more than ever, Wayne was torn between the demands of his career and his duties as a husband and father. But for Wayne, his work was his life. And when he was offered a chance to reunite with director Howard Hawks for Rio Bravo, he hoped a return to the Western would break his box office slump.
Yes, there'll never be another like Rio Bravo, with its thundering story of raw courage against overwhelming odds, and its once-in-a-lifetime combination of today's hottest star names.
Where are you going?
Get your hands off.
I said, where are you going?
You got no use for a man you can't depend on. One bad night and I'm done for.
Cast as the defiant sheriff John T. Chance, Wayne co-starred opposite Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson, and newcomer Angie Dickinson.
The scenes were long and complex, and Duke was used to, all right, get up and I'll hit you again. You know, he had very short scenes usually and tough scenes. Well, ours went on for quite a few pages and minutes, and they were very difficult. They ended up great, but it was hard work.
Tired, aren't you, John T? I can fix you a nice hot bath.
All I want is a drink.
Then
This is all I can do for you?
Audiences loved Wayne in the traditional role, and Rio Bravo was one of the most popular films of 1959. That same year, John Ford cast Wayne in The Horse Soldiers.
Make way for a rousing adventure story that relives history's most daring Give 'em Hell raid, and the two hellions who rode side by side to lead it.
But by now, the veteran director was past his prime, and Duke's confidence was shaken when the film fell short of everyone's expectations. Despite the success of The Searchers and Rio Bravo, Wayne had suffered 5 box office flops in as many years. His position as one of the highest paid and most powerful actors in Hollywood was in jeopardy. But the worst was yet to come. In the spring of 1959, Wayne received a surprising phone call from Saks Fifth Avenue in New York. Several recent bills had gone unpaid. Wayne was shocked by the news that he didn't have the cash to cover his purchases. At the age of 52, John Wayne was nearly broke. Already reeling from a string of box office flops, John Wayne was stunned to find that Boo Roos, his financial advisor of 17 years, had squandered his entire fortune in a series of bad investments.
He was ripped off. That story is fairly common in Hollywood. I don't know that Duke was a good businessman. He was very generous with his friends, free with his money. I think he got very much into the work, the relationships, at the expense of good business sense.
Financially strapped and with 2 families to support, the 52-year-old actor decided to risk everything and embark on a new phase of his career. Under the banner of his own company, Batjack, he would produce and direct a project that had been his dream for over 15 years, the epic story of the Alamo.
Wayne saw this as the great fight for liberty. So this theme, a group of frontier types laying down their lives in defense of liberty, appealed to him a great deal.
Duke was determined to direct and produce the Alamo himself, and United Artists had agreed to invest in his project. But the studio had one condition. They insisted that he must act in the film as well and play the part of the story's hero, Davy Crockett. Wayne reluctantly agreed to their demand, and in the fall of 1959 began filming in the remote desert town of Brackettville, Texas. The huge cast included Richard Widmark and Wayne's children, Patrick and Aissa. Duke's son, Michael, worked as assistant producer, and Pilar stayed at her husband's side. On the first day of filming, the fledgling director had a Catholic priest bless the set. And from that moment on, Wayne led the cast and crew as if he were leading a real army. The stress of producing, directing, and acting left Wayne impatient and short-tempered as he tried to manage his multiple roles.
I think under pressure, he wasn't the best director. He didn't get along all that well with some of the actors. He bawled people out too much.
Richard Widmark said that in the making of the Alamo, Wayne would crack him up and he would shout at people, "God damn it, be graceful like me."
To add to the tension, Wayne's old friend, director John Ford, showed up on the set, unannounced and uninvited.
Ford, of course, came on the set, tried to take over as virtually sitting in the director's chair and calling the shots, and now Duke's got the problem. Here's this mentor of his, a man he loves. He doesn't want to insult him.
In an effort to avoid embarrassment and keep peace with Ford, Wayne gave the 4-time Academy Award winner the assignment to shoot second unit action scenes, a gesture that would cost Duke an additional $250,000. But problems continued to plague the production. An actress was murdered by a jealous boyfriend, and the budget was rapidly exceeding its original $7.5 million. As pressure mounted, Wayne was smoking more than 100 cigarettes a day.
He always smoked. I mean, he lit the new cigarette with the old one. He was a chain smoker. It was just nervous energy, because he had so many people to direct. And when you are in a remote location like that, everybody becomes a baby. Duke was there, and everybody complained to him. He was under a lot of pressure during that movie.
In order to meet the escalating production costs, Duke put everything on the line, taking a second mortgage on his Encino home and even pledging his own salary toward the cause.
He put his own financial resources in the Alamo to the point of really putting himself in a precarious economic position. He believed in that film that much, and it was a passion with him.
It's here at last, the monumental history-making motion picture, 14 years in the making, The Alamo. Starring John Wayne as Colonel David Crockett.
He's still on his feet. Oh, no. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, and it's my turn. Well, thanks, friend. If you don't insist on having them to yourself, I'll give you a hand. Pleasure, friend.
When The Alamo was finally completed, the budget had swollen from $7.5 million to more than $12 million, the largest of any movie at that time. But when it was released in 1960, the film earned only $2 million. Critics were unimpressed with the patriotic tribute and singled out Duke's directing as sentimental and embarrassing. In a desperate bid to attract audiences, Wayne's publicist mounted an aggressive Oscar campaign. But the last-ditch effort only served to alienate Academy voters. Although The Alamo managed to earn 6 Oscar nominations, including one for Best Picture, the Academy snubbed Wayne's direction and acting, and the only award the film received was for Best Sound.
His dream kind of crumbled, even though he made the money back eventually. It hurt his chances ever to be a director because people wouldn't take the risk of financing him when this one had not succeeded. So The Alamo turned out to be his Alamo.
Disappointed and embarrassed by the failure of his dream project and acutely aware of his mounting debts, Duke threw himself into the work and the roles that he knew best.
My friend, you're a very brave man. And pretty soon you're gonna catch on I ain't your friend. Your assignment tonight is strategic. You can't give the enemy a break. Send him to hell. Let's give it a try, Pockets. He's tired.
What, are we talking about the same animal?
We were on Hatari for 4 months in Africa. I had a lot of fun with the Duke. One day we're sitting there playing gin, and a leopard walks out of the underbrush and starts walking towards us. I say to him, Duke, there's a leopard walking towards us. He says to me, Buttons, see what he wants. That was the Duke.
But by now, the golden age of Hollywood Wayne had known and loved was coming to an end. And the actor's world was changing, both professionally and personally.
Ward Bond died, and Ward Bond had been a very close friend. Grant Withers committed suicide somewhere in this period. Duke realizes the old gang is more than breaking up, dying off.
In 1962, Wayne and director John Ford returned to the Old West with the remaining members of Ford's legendary stock company to film The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. To the surprise of those involved, the film opened to lukewarm reviews. Critics seemed unprepared for its somber tone. That summer, Duke and Ford made their final picture together, Donovan's Reef. It signaled the end of one of the most famous collaborations between actor and director in film history.
On a personal level, I think Wayne felt that he had been given his big chance by Ford in the Stagecoach, and so he felt duty toward him.
He told me he modeled his life on Jack Ford's life. You know, he directly emulated him. He used to say, John Ford directed my life, and in a sense that was true.
For his next film, Wayne used the Ford model and created a family atmosphere that the beleaguered actor desperately needed. In McClintock, he returned to his popular Western character and was joined by his son, Patrick.
Does a tender story of family devotion get you right here?
If you're my father, if you love me, you'll shoot him.
Well, I'm your father, and I sure love you, so...
Duke's son Michael took on the producing chores, while wife Pilar watched over 7-year-old Aisa, and the newest Wayne family member, John Ethan, born in 1962. McClintock became one of the most popular films of 1963, and for the first time in many years, Wayne's personal and professional life came together in perfect harmony. But just as things seemed to be getting back on track, the actor was hit once again with devastating news. In 1964, during a required physical for the film The Sons of Katie Elder, doctors discovered a suspicious spot on Wayne's lung. At the age of 57, John Wayne, who had rarely been sick, feared his 6-pack-a-day smoking habit had finally caught up with him. After consulting a doctor at the Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles, John Wayne was informed that he needed extensive surgery to remove a tumor in his left lung. At 57 years old, he was diagnosed with cancer. Not wanting to harm his image, Wayne's publicist and doctors assured the press that the screen hero's hospital visit was simply to repair an old football injury.
He was savvy enough to realize this didn't fit the John Wayne image, and certainly his advisors told him to try to keep that from the public at first.
In September of 1964, doctors were forced to remove Wayne's left lung over the course of 2 6-hour operations. The grueling surgery required the removal of a rib and left him with a 28-inch scar across his chest. 3 weeks later, as the severely weakened actor left the hospital, he was met by hordes of curious reporters. With the cameras flashing, Duke struggled to his feet and boldly walked out unassisted.
I think that was his biggest performance ever, to fool the press that he was fine, and smiled and shook hands with everybody. When he got into the car, he said to me, "Please take me home." The guy was just dying.
For several months, Duke maintained the football injury story, but deceiving the public did not set well with him, and on December 29th, he decided to speak up. In an exclusive interview with a Hollywood columnist, Wayne revealed to the world that he had cancer.
Duke was a very honest fella, and he wanted to keep a clean slate and level with the public. Not necessarily that he had just licked the big C, but that it would be a little more honest, and probably he'd feel more comfortable with that. So he made the big announcement.
The star's candid admission was seen as heroic, and the country rallied around him. In America's eyes, even cancer couldn't stop John Wayne. As if to live up to his on-screen image, less than 4 months after his surgery, and against doctors' orders, Wayne flew to Durango, Mexico to start production on The Sons of Katie.
Doing a physical sequence. When that was over, he immediately grabbed for the oxygen mask. Apparently there was a reporter on the set who was trying to film that. Duke practically yanked the camera out of his hand because he didn't want the public seeing him in that way. I don't know whether by then he himself had bought the John Wayne image or not, but he certainly was having trouble accepting his own mortality, that he's getting older, that he can't do some of these things any longer.
Now 59, Duke moved his family to Newport Beach, California. Set in conservative Orange County, just south of Los Angeles, the small oceanside community was an ideal location to spend time with his growing family, which now included a new daughter, Marisa, and 12 grandchildren.
That was the same year that he had bought the Wild Goose. So we went from Encino to Newport Beach to be close to the boat. And of course, the main thing then was going fishing, taking the boat out to Carolina, having his friends on board. So although he was upset and unhappy about losing his dear friends. He still had a brand new family to be with and do things with.
By 1966, America was changing. The liberal idealism of John Kennedy had turned into civil chaos. Race riots were erupting in cities across the country, and once peaceful civil rights marches had given way to bloody battles fought in front of America and the world. But the Duke remained as traditional as ever. An active Republican, he had campaigned for Goldwater in the presidential race of 1964, and in 1966 publicly supported Ronald Reagan in California's heated governor's race. When his conservative political beliefs continued to draw audiences, Republican officials discreetly approached him about running for political office.
After Goldwater's defeat, a group of Republicans came and asked him, Mr. Wayne, would you consider running for president for the Republican Party? Duke was flabbergasted because he said, well, first, I cannot afford the cut in salary, and second, who's going to vote for an actor anyway?
By the end of 1966, Lyndon Johnson had committed nearly 200,000 American soldiers to the conflict in Vietnam, polarizing the country and bringing Wayne to the forefront of the battle. After a 3-week USO tour, Wayne returned home determined to stand by his president and rally support for the troops overseas. In 1968, he directed and starred in
the United States had been very good to him, and it's sort of my country, right or wrong, and the country's position is to be in Vietnam. Therefore, you don't question that. You go with it.
The Green Berets opened to tremendous business, earning $20 million, and demonstrating that John Wayne's values were not his alone. But Wayne's unbridled patriotism became an easy target for critics and anti-war protesters who picketed theaters across the country. Duke was determined to meet his detractors head-on, and in his next film, he would be offered the chance of a lifetime. Exhausted by the critical onslaught brought on by the Green Berets, John Wayne left for Colorado in the fall of 1968 to film True Grit, the story of an over-the-hill frontier marshal hired by a young woman to track down her father's murderers. In the character of Rooster Cogburn, Wayne saw himself, a man of strong convictions, but an outsider in a world of changing values.
Where did you get you for stealing that money?
Well, I didn't consider it stealing.
Didn't belong to you.
That's the position them New Mexicans took. I had to flee for my life. When that posse thinned out, I turned old Bo around and taking them reins in my teeth, I charged them boys firing 2 Navy 6s. They must have all been married men that loved their families, 'cause they scattered and run for home.
The director said to him, I want you to eat as much as you want. We want you fat and ugly. And Duke thought, this is wonderful, because every time I've done a movie, everybody says, you have to lose 20 pounds. So he thought, gee, this is pretty neat.
Well, come to see a fat old man sometime. Yeah!
He had a sense of what he could and could not play, and he worked within those limits very intelligently.
Yeah!
So that when finally he does become an overt self-parody in something like True Grit, you get a sense of all that history and craft being brought to bear on sending himself up in this delicious way that he did it.
When True Grit premiered in the summer of 1969, it was an enormous hit, earning John Wayne industry-wide acclaim and his second Oscar nomination for Best Actor.
He was not comfortable at all. I could see that his hand was pressing against my arm harder and harder. And it was such a relief when Barbra Streisand finally got up on stage and opened the envelope.
The winner is John Wayne in True Grit.
On April 7th, 1970, after over 150 screen performances, the 62-year-old actor took home his first Academy Award, a fitting end to a tumultuous decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm no stranger to this podium. I've come up here and picked up these beautiful golden men before, but always for friends. One night I picked up two, one for Admiral John Ford, one for our beloved Gary Cooper. I was very clever and witty that night, the envy of even Bob Hope. But tonight I don't feel very clever, very witty. I feel very grateful, very humble.
I don't think he expected it. I think he was insecure enough to not ever really consider himself a great actor. The Oscar meant a great deal to Duke. Finally, he had won the acceptance of his peers.
By now, Wayne's screen persona had
Station kind of dried up, ma'am.
After more than 40 years in front of the camera, John Wayne, the man, seemed larger than life.
He was invited for the launching of a destroyer, and they had him break the champagne bottle on the bow of the ship. And the ship doesn't slide down into the water like it's supposed to. So Wayne goes out and he pushes on the bow of the ship. He leans on it and he pushes on it, and the ship slides down into the waves. It was just such a magic moment. That was the spirit of John Wayne.
But privately, Duke still struggled with cash flow problems, and his constant location work was a strain on his family and his marriage.
Every time that Duke would say, okay, we're going to be 4 months in Durango, Mexico, the kids would say, we don't want to go on that location. And Duke was very old-fashioned. He always wanted things to kind of never move, that nothing would ever vary in his life. I found that after 20 years of doing this that I started to get a little tired.
In 1973, after 20 years of marriage and 3 children, Duke and Pilar Wayne announced their separation.
I think what happened with Pilar, in a sense, she grew up. She wanted to be her own person. And Duke, I think, couldn't handle that very well. There were many demands on his career. He wanted her there. On the other hand, he wanted to go drink with the boys. And Pilar began to resent that. Duke hated to see that happen.
That same year, Wayne also faced losing his friend and teacher, John Ford. On August 30th, he visited the cancer-ravaged director for what would be the last time. The two shared brandy and memories and said their final goodbyes.
One of the last times he went to see him, Wayne was appearing a lot on Laugh-In. And my grandfather, he was on his deathbed, literally. And he started berating Wayne for being on the show. He says, you know, you shouldn't do this TV stuff. It's bad for your career. And he never stopped doing that, directing his life, so to speak.
John Ford passed away the following day. Now, more than ever, Wayne found solace in his work and in his frequent public appearances. At 65, the outspoken actor even continued to poke fun at his own image. In January 1974, the editors of Harvard University's Lampoon invited Duke to Cambridge, Massachusetts, to accept their infamous Brass Balls Award.
When Harvard invited him to come, they hired an armed personnel carrier from the National Guard and had him come down the street at high noon in this semi-tank, and they thought they would get the last laugh on him.
By the end of the ceremony, the Harvard students who had come to jeer gave Duke a standing ovation.
Wayne was never dumb, he was witty. They said, for instance, where'd you get that fake hair? And he said, that's not fake hair. That's real hair. It's very expensive hair. It's not my hair, but it's real hair.
Wayne, do you look at yourself as the fulfillment of the American dream?
I don't look at myself any more than I have to, friend.
The Duke was now one of the most recognized and respected men in the world. Throughout the 1970s, he capitalized on his celebrity status in a variety of television appearances, comedy specials, and public service announcements.
So why don't all of you do yourselves a favor? Get a checkup. Talk someone you like into getting a checkup. Nag someone you love into getting a checkup. And while you're at it, Send a check to the American Cancer Society, too.
In 1975, Wayne reprised the role that had earned him an Oscar. He co-starred for the first time with Katharine Hepburn in Rooster Cogburn and the Lady.
Marshal Cogburn, you're in a sorry state.
No man alive likes to be called high-smelling and low down.
Eyeball to eyeball or shoulder to shoulder. They're the toughest pair in the West.
You got the gun, but you ain't got the know-how to use it.
Ain't that the way it works, Hawk?
In 1976, and for the first time in 25 years, John Wayne slipped out of the top 10 list of most popular actors. But Duke was now facing far more serious matters. At the age of 68, the legendary star's health had taken a turn for the worse, and he was about to turn his painful struggle into one of the most personal and harrowing performances of his career. In 1975, John Wayne began production on his 169th film, The Shootist. But by now he was suffering from a chronic, racking cough and had severe difficulty breathing. Though doctors could find nothing wrong, Wayne secretly feared that the cancer he had fought 10 years earlier had returned. The Shootist, co-starring Jimmy Stewart, Lauren Bacall, and Ron Howard, told the story of John Bernard Books, a dying gunfighter trying to make sense of his life. The film's theme mirrored Wayne's own fears about his declining health.
Why don't you just say it, flat out?
All right. You have a cancer. Advanced.
Can't you cut it out, Doc?
I'd have to gut you like a fish.
Near the end of filming, a bad case of influenza left Duke hospitalized for 2 weeks. When he returned to the set, Wayne faced one of the most difficult scenes of his career, a final showdown for the Western hero.
The director, Don Siegel, had to shoot that entire shootout and finale without him. And then he came back to play his death scene. And it was weird, it was emotional, and it was tense. And nobody talked about it.
Look out!
There was never any sense when we were making The Shootist, never any sort of an admission on his part that this would be his last film. Matter of fact, 6 months or so later, I saw him at a function, and by now he was looking kind of thin and a little more frail. And he said, "Hey kid, I found a book, a couple of great parts. It's you and me or it's nobody." And it was one of the highlights of my career, you know, to hear him say that and know that he wanted to work with me again. And I'm always sorry that that didn't come to pass.
Unfortunately, Wayne's health continued to deteriorate. In January of 1979, after complaining of severe stomach pain, his worst fears came true when he was diagnosed with stomach cancer. In April of 1979, Wayne made a moving appearance at the Academy Awards, presenting the Oscar for Best Picture. His physical condition was a shocking announcement that Duke was playing out his final scenes. As the Duke's health worsened, actress Elizabeth Taylor and his close friend and co-star Maureen O'Hara traveled to Washington, D.C. to make a heart-wrenching plea for a special medal to be awarded to Wayne for his contribution to America.
To the people of the world, John Wayne is not just an actor, and a very fine actor. John Wayne is the United States of America. And I feel that the medal should say just one thing: John Wayne, American.
Wayne was awarded the medal on May 26, 1979, his 72nd birthday. In June, Wayne entered UCLA Medical Center, suffering side effects from chemotherapy. While in the hospital, he was visited by friends and admirers.
The doctors tried to protect him, but there are people like Henry Fonda who came and basically said, "I'm not going away till I see him." Maureen O'Hara had visited him at home and spent some time with him, reminiscing about the old days, and it's pretty nostalgic because both Maureen and Duke realized this is probably the last time they're going to see each other.
I really did pray that God would take him, because I hated to see a man that had been so strong and powerful in his lifetime deteriorate little by little by little.
On June 11, 1979, with his 7 children at his side, 72-year-old John Wayne died of cancer. He was buried in Newport Beach, California, in an unmarked grave overlooking the Pacific Ocean. In a career that spanned half a century, John Wayne came to symbolize the independent spirit of America. Honest, straightforward, and fiercely loyal, he climbed up the hard way and took adversity on the chin. On the long road to stardom, his life took on mythic proportions. Though he never fought in a war or rode the wild frontier, to his legions of fans, John Wayne will always be an American hero.
As long as those